And we're live. Just gonna wait for a few more people to jump on here, and I'll start talking. Because when I start talking, I don't stop talking. Anybody log on yet? There we go. Got a few people on here. Hello, welcome everybody in. It's time for the weekly live. I missed last week. I was away in Miami, doing the, I guess, Art Basel things and meeting up with a bunch of people, etc.
150 on Instagram right now.
Yeah, so why we're doing these lives, I decided to do all these lives on a weekly basis. Well, a couple of things, few updates. I can also kind of pack in an unboxing while I'm at it because it gets tough. We have so many watches to come in on a daily basis. It gets tough to keep you guys updated on some of the newer stuff that we're buying, selling, etc. Just really go over general topics. I guess the biggest news, as far as I'm concerned, is to say I was wrong. I was so wrong. What was I wrong about? I was wrong about the Tom Brady watch. You guys saw the auction results. You saw me go over to Sotheby's. If you caught that video on YouTube, and I got to handle like the helmets, the jerseys, the watches. Like I literally said I wasn't going to wash my hands a couple of weeks after that. I got to handle greatness, right? Because I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Brady is like the GOAT of all GOATs. And mind you, I'm an Eagles fan, right? But you got to give credit where credit is due. And I was a bit taken back by the fact that the one watch that I said was going to be close to $2 million only fetched, what, $720,000? To me, that was a bit disappointing, I guess. But at the same token, I think that it was the market that influenced. It was the market influence that really, I guess, affected the price, right? Because where we are in the market, we're in the market where the market took a dip a couple of years back. The prices have adjusted, specifically on what? On a lot of hot models. And a lot of those hot models were what? They were Royal Oaks. Now, mind you, this is still a hell of a result. I mean, $750,000 is not little money, if you will, right? But again, my expectation that the combination of Brady fans and horological fans were going to prevail at a much larger number. What is that watch really worth? It's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. So as far as we're concerned today, it's worth $720,000. But if somebody decides to go and resell that watch, they can ask whatever they want for it. It's one of a kind, right? Paul Newman, somebody said, the Paul Newman, I think it fetched close to 1.3, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so Paul Newman was like somewhere around 1.3. I guess we can pull up the Sotheby's auction on the screen to see the results? But in either case, what I was trying to say is that if you look at a Royal Oak that in the hot market, let's say it was trading at, let's pick a 15,202, right? And that 15,202 in a high market got up to $125,000. Even some of the chronographs, Blue Dials, they get up to $125,000. So what ended up happening is those things took a dump, and some of those lost to the tune of 50%. When that happens, leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, so they're really, really careful. Had that watch been auctioned off 2 years ago, I should say 2.5 years or 3 years ago now, in the midst of the high market, you would have seen results of that $2 million mark. And that's where I kind of made the mistake, right? And with that said, yeah, I was wrong. That was really terrible. In other news, what do we got going on? We got the end of the year, and we're looking at numbers, right? And they're kind of sad in the sense that there were certain goals that we set in the beginning of the year, not just financials, but in general, right? And right now, I usually take the month of December to go over everything and anything within the company. And when I say that, I mean numbers, and by numbers, starting with marketing. And by the way, all you guys that are sending super chats on YouTube and whatever the other things are on Instagram, all that money doesn't go to the company. All that money goes to my media team, the guys that make all this stuff happen and create all these videos and come up with interesting topics, as well as run the show when it comes to my media department. But in either case, I look at social media numbers. We set certain goals in the beginning of the year. Hey, account X, we need to have this much exposure, this many followers. We need to grow an exponential whatever. I look at those numbers. Then I look at numbers as far as traffic to the website. And all the things when it comes to website, when it comes to social media presence, when it comes to that type of growth, that's all has been skyrocketing this year. We actually surpassed probably 70% of our goals. And we set our goals pretty high, meaning that it's like, if we get here, that's amazing kind of thing, rather than setting the bar low, right? So In that department, we did a tremendous job, thanks to my social media department, thanks to my video department, thanks to my marketing department in general, the guys that run the stuff on the web. But what we found is that the revenue numbers at the end of the year are less than expected, right? We're off by about 10% this year, right? My expectation, or at least I wanted to meet last year's goals. Last year we did 111 million in revenue, and this year we did around 100. Now, is that a bad thing? And probably one of the worst years that the industry has seen in a long, long time? No, it's a great thing. But I also realized that the price points and the price levels have been different. If you go back a year where the market was still somewhat adjusted, and I was like, well, wait a minute. If a year ago I was selling a watch for $22,000, and now that same watch is selling for, let's say, $18,000, well, there's the adjustment. But here's one for you. No way, this is live. This is live. Why is this guy saying this is not live? Is the whole price too high? Says Tedo Millis. I believe that we have adjusted. Let me tell you something about pricing in the market today. We're back to regular schedule program. Now, the regular schedule program, or the pricing has really settled in at what I like to call a normal market, which to me is plus 10, 20%, right? So there's no more movement up like you saw during COVID. There's no more moving down as you saw post the hype, right? There's still some pieces that are adjusting, granted. But for the most part, we kind of stabilize within that 10 to 20% price range. So when you buy a watch today, buy with the expectations that if you're going to sell it in a short amount of time, you're going to lose 10 to 20%. Why? Because odds are you're going to sell it to guys like us or another dealer or a store that's locally. When you bought it, you probably bought it from a guy like us or your local dealer. If you bought certain models from Rolex, from AD, you can still make a profit on a lot of these models, right? But if you're buying it on a secondary where you don't have the connect to go into, let's say, an AD and buy, I don't know, a GMT at retail, you expect to lose the money that we made, right? Because when we sell watches, we make a profit. Our average Rolex margin this year was, and these are real numbers, 10.9%. So let's call it 11%. So if you're buying a $20,000 watch, expect to lose that 11%. Also, if you're buying a watch that's new and then it becomes pre-owned, expect to lose a little more because now that watch sells for less as a pre-owned item, as you can imagine. So that's what I mean by regularly scheduled program. Regularly scheduled program is how the watch market always has been. Nobody expected to get out there and buy a watch and say, oh, I'm going to keep it and I'm going to make money. Were there exceptions to the rules to that? Absolutely. The vintage stuff, there's certain vintage stuff that you buy and you hold it over a long period of time. Odds are you'll make a little bit of money if you buy the right product, right? But for the most part, 99% of the watch world has always been the same. I've always compared it to the car world, right? So when people get upset and they buy a watch for 20 grand and bring it back and it's worth 16 used or 15 used, I'm like, well, if you would have bought a car, it would have been worth less than half, right? And also people don't understand the concept of things going up over time, and that time period is usually long. Like if you buy a Neo vintage watch today and you think that, hey, this guy's going to be a winner, 20 years from now, it may very well be, or it may not be. Depends on how many were produced. And the worst thing that hits the watch market when it comes to resale value is what? Trends, right? Some things are very popular. I remember starting out in this industry, Frank Mueller was the most popular brand ever. It was the Richard Mille of the time. And Frank Mueller is no longer the Richard Mille of the time. I remember Ulysse Nardin being the hottest selling brand back in 2005, 2006, and 2007. And now it's no longer because the CEO died and they got taken over by a group that overproduced and started spitting out, volumes of these pieces and polluted the market. Now there's the reverse, right? The ownership took over. They cut down production. Perhaps we'll see Nardin in its heyday once again. It kind of all goes up and down like this. But the bottom line is it's the same thing that I've been telling you guys over the years. Watches are not an investment. They're an expensive toy. Buy what you like first and foremost within the means that you can afford, and don't have expectations of this being an investment. Certainly a better place to park your money than, let's say, a car, right? Because those tend to lose value a lot more. But if you want investments, buy Apple stock, buy real estate, buy all those other things. These things are meant to be enjoyed, worn. And you know what? If you break out even after a few years of wearing something, I always tell people, so you're buying a $50,000 watch from me. If I gave you that same 50, and I'm a buyer back on that watch, let's say for 40,000. What if I gave you that same watch and I said, have it for 5 years and give me 10 grand? Pay me $2 grand a year to wear that watch. You'd be like, oh, that's not a bad deal. So you can also look at it that way. there was a comment about Federico taking a stab at us, right? Where's that? Let's put that up on the screen. All right. So Brady Brown says, any response to Federico talks watches? He took some shots at you guys. I actually woke up this morning and I'm looking at my phone and I get all these messages with the link to the video. And what Freddie was referring to, and I know Freddie a long time and we've spoken, we have no bad blood between us, but it did irk me a little bit. And I'll tell you why it irked me, mostly because what he wasn't even talking about me. He was talking about Adrian. Now, for those of you guys that know the dynamic in this company, Adrian's been here since he was a kid, doing busy work, filling out spreadsheets, and eventually made his way all the way out to head of procurement as well as head of sales, right? He's my right-hand man, he's family, and he's somebody, when somebody talks shit about him, I actually kind of take that personally. But I'm also not that guy to go off the deep end, right? I want to bring up, what killed me the most is that Freddie made a video, obviously made for clicks. The title was for clicks. The topic was for clicks. And at the same token, he was trying to peddle a couple of watches while he was doing it, which is nothing wrong with that. But specifically the Purnell that he was trying to peddle, that's what really made me laugh, if you will. But without naming any names and pointing any fingers, he referred to somebody, and everybody and their mother, if you look at the comments of the video, knew that they were talking about me, Luxury Bazaar, and in particular Adrian. I'm going to bring up the clip that he had the reaction to. Let's play that clip.
We got about $2 million here in watches now. What we're looking at here is Purnell's. I think the watch industry and community as a whole, and the general sentiment is that there's a lot of redundancy in the market. Brands seem to produce the same thing over and over, maybe adjusting a movement or adjusting case color or dial color, whatever the case may be. So everybody's kind of more or less looking for the next Richard Mille. But I think if one brand really has a shot at it, it's Purnell. That's why we've been going heavy with them. We've sold about 5, working on the 6th one in the past 2 months, which is a lot of them considering how much they make. Super excited about these. The retail price on them all is all like $600,000-$700,000, and we're selling them anywhere from $350 to $500 depending on what the watch is. So they're still traded at a significant discount, and I believe that moving forward there is a chance, never say watches are investment, but there is a chance that you're not going to be able to get your hands on these and they're going to retain pretty good value.
All right, so if you guys listen to that clip careful, and you can see it again, I think, what is it? It's a short on my YouTube channel somewhere, right? So if you go to shorts, you'll be able to replay that video if you want to. Now, if you look at that video and ask yourself a question, all those things that Federico said about basically us trying to pump and dump, because that's the title of the video, pump and dump, all right? He said that we're shamelessly trying to pump a product that's out there cents on a dollar, and we're trying to sell it for some stupid amounts of money. First of all, when Adrian mentioned the fact that, hey, this may be the next Richard Mille, and I've said this numerous times before, we feel that way, but not in terms of monies, right? At the very end, he said it may not, right? We don't know because of the things I just said earlier, actually, the trends and how the market is, et cetera, or if the company's even going to be around. It's not easy to run a business, especially a new one. I've also said I think it may be the next Richard Mille because I felt that the market was ready for something that's avant-garde, that's well-made, that's different than anything else, and at the same token, very expensive when it comes to retails, because Richard Mille is in that category, right? Super popular, super avant-garde designs, use of materials, complications, et cetera, and expensive, all right? And Adrian was very careful to say, hey, where they're trading at in reference to their retail price today, where they may or may not go, and that was it. And that was translated into, oh, look at the shameless pump and dump by somebody who happens to have certain watches and stuff. Well, let's start from the fact that both myself, Federico, and any other person out there that's in the watch industry or in the business of selling watches, it is not a secret that our social media platform is used for what? Educating, informating, but most of all, eyes. And what do those eyes translate into? Clients. And then in turn, what? Sales, right? So it's not a big secret that every company out there, whether you're a watch dealer, car dealer, or whatever dealer, we utilize social media in order to drive eyes and sales to our company. It's actually one of the most major revenue streams for us. And I don't mean like the views on YouTube. I mean revenue streams in terms of guys like you watching us and say, okay, I would like to buy a watch from him. Well, some guys say, oh, I hate him. And there's haters. It goes either way. You expose yourself when you get out of social media. So that's really not a secret. Now let's talk about specifically the watch that Federico showed on his stream. What Federico showed is a watch called Cecile Purnell. Quick history for you on Cecile Purnell. Cecile Purnell was opened back in 1918. Okay. And it was one of those companies that you see numerously across the board. And I can name 10 brands that have been revived over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years that were around 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And then somebody buys the name rights, they revive it, they may create a product and they try to market it the best that they can, hopefully come out with a good product that actually sticks. 8 out of 10 of those companies don't make it because it's not very easy. It's not if you think it's not easy to sell watches, wait till you try to actually create a brand. Whether you buy a name or not is irrelevant. Now, back in 1918, Mr. Cecile Purnell was actually infatuated with Breguet's tourbillons. So he started making his own tourbillons because he was literally infatuated with the tourbillon complication. 2006 is when that company was revived by one of the descendants, a grandson or somebody of Mr. Cecile Purnell. And guess what? They failed miserably. They were Cecile Purnell, which is the watch you see Federico show. Then they went to C. Purnell. And in 2020, a brand new company was opened up. And guess what? That company was called Purnell. They still wanted to utilize the name Purnell because going back to 1918, Cecile Purnell was a big deal. And they decided to continue using the name Purnell. That company could have been called something else. So what I say, when you're showing a watch that you paid 20 cents on the dollar for, and by the way, you overpaid. Because about, I'm going to say 10 years ago, I bought a Cecile Purnell closeout and I paid 11 cents on the dollar. No secret. In fact, you can still see some of the remnants of the original Cecile Purnell on Chrono 24. There are tourbillons out there selling for $20,000, $15,000, which is pretty much 10 cents on a dollar. And what you bought, Federico, was one of those. So at 20 cents, you actually overpaid. But if you're going to make a statement, what I'd love for you to see is for you to compare apples to apples. And this is what I wrote to you on WhatsApp today. I literally said to you, if you're going to compare something, compare apples to apples, right? Because what you're doing is you're taking an older Cecile Purnell, a company that no longer exists, the people behind it are no longer anywhere be around, and you're comparing it to a brand new brand that's called Purnell, a brand that did what? Invested a boatload of money into technology. They brought in Eric Coudray. You guys don't know who Eric Coudray is. He's a legend. Eric Coudray is a guy that invented the gyro tourbillon. For the longest time, there's been that argument. Was it Frank Mueller or was it Eric Coudray that came up with the first 3D tourbillon, i.e. a tourbillon that spins among 3 axes? Because as you guys, some of you guys know, when it comes to tourbillons, it was invented for a pocket watch by Breguet, so it really only works when it's perpendicular to the ground. And for a long time, both Frank Mueller and Eric Coudray were simultaneously actually working on a project where they wanted to make a 3D tourbillon. And they did. Credit goes to Frank Mueller officially. Some may think it goes to Eric Coudray, but it doesn't matter. Eric Coudray, then that tourbillon was later implemented in the Jaeger-LeCour gyro tourbillon. Irrelevant. They bring in Eric Coudray, and Eric Coudray say, how can I take this to the next level? He goes, well, I'm going to make I'm going to make a 3D tourbillon in the likes of we've never seen. And that came down to speed, right? The 3 cages at the speeds of 3 cages of spinning. Again, this isn't a lesson on Cecile Purnell. But to address the situation of what was said today, people talk shit about me all the time. That, again, comes with the territory when it comes to putting yourself out there on social media. Sometimes you can't walk down the street without somebody saying something nasty or negative. And I've always said that it's super easy. Social media makes it very easy because you're literally sitting behind a keyboard or a phone and you're not really looking the person in the face when you're saying something bad about it. And then people like to also make stuff up because it creates drama, and this is what the internet likes, unfortunately. I guess call it human social media nature. What I'm trying to get at is we took a clip, which if you rewatch that clip, nothing in the likes of what Federico made it seem to be is true, actually. And you took an apple and compared it to an orange. And yes, I think the first time I showed you guys a Purnell is I actually bought one for myself. This was about 9 months ago, a year ago. I was wearing a white Piece Unique double Spherian tourbillon. And people saying, hey, what's going on? What is it? What is it? What is it? I visited them. I looked at their watches. I inspected their watches. I looked at the quality of the watchmaking. I looked at the innovation. I looked at the pricing, which I felt were a bit hefty. And I said, you know what? I'm going to give these a shot. And we have since sold 8 of those. At what pricing? For those of you that bought them, you know. But it certainly isn't 20 cents on a dollar. And it's certainly, I am not paying 20 cents on a dollar for those watches, believe me when I tell you. So if you're going to get out there and you're going to create some type of drama, I normally don't pay attention. But because you were talking about Adrian, whom I hold near and dear to my heart, that's why I decided to actually address all of that stuff. So for those of you guys who are not familiar with the brand, do your research. Look at Purnell versus Cecile Purnell. And again, that double tourbillon that you bought for $50,000 supposedly, I think you overpaid because that's not Purnell. That's an old company that no longer exists. It doesn't have the same technology that the current pieces have. Now, is Purnell going to be the next winner, like Adrian said in this video? I don't know, but we're willing to put we're willing to put our money behind it and put our money where our mouth is and take that chance. And in no world do I or any of my salespeople or Adrian or anybody in this company ever tell somebody, buy this watch, it's going to go up in value. And I don't understand this whole pump and dump situation. A lot of people in the comments refer to Watchbox and Journe. You see Watchbox dumping any of their Journes? I don't think so. But I guess history will show. And again, I'm not here to tell you that, hey, get out there and buy a bunch of Purnells. I'm here to tell you buy what you like first and foremost, within the means that you can afford. Do I think watches can lose value too? Because a lot is said to be a crisis and real estate can lose. What is that? Show me that question. Do you think watches can lose value too? Because a lot is said to be a crisis and real estate can lose, and that's a lot. I'm not sure what you're trying to ask here. I just said it earlier. Yes, most watches will lose their value. Unless you're a watch dealer and you're buying this stuff right and you have the means to resell it at a profit, you're going to lose money on your watches. But again, it's how much you lose, right? Let me show you a couple of watches while I'm here.
Roman, can you just push the that closer?
This? Yeah. Okay.
Use the logo as your reference.
The logo is my reference. These guys did a good job. So what did you put these in order or something?
Yep.
So, oh, this is cool. So we got this 37 millimeter Yachtmaster. Can you see this? Here we go. That's nice. We got this 37 millimeter Yachtmaster, and seemingly not a big deal. But what we noticed is we noticed an increase in demand, specifically in the 37 millimeter Yachtmaster. Now, these Yachtmasters historically were never in demand, and it's funny how the market works, right? It's funny how the watch market works. Back in the day when we had the original with the platinum dial, it didn't really sell very well because it had a high retail price because of the dial. And of course, they had a reiteration, the blue dial, the gray dial, et cetera, et cetera. People are requesting the 37 millimeters because you see the trend sort of going smaller. And why historically this would be a ladies' watch at 37 millimeters. Now we see a lot of guys requesting them because we kind of got into an area where some of the market thinks smaller is better. And again, based on that demand, that's why we are starting to end up with a lot of these 37 millimeters. Tudor Pelagus, I mean, best alternative to a Submariner, I guess. This is why this is here. The ladies' Nautilus, right? And so the 7118, a watch that you saw out on the market in the high times, all the way up to $80,000. This thing is now trading in the mid 50s. Again, one of those watches that kind of goes hand in hand with what I said about the 37 millimeter Yachtmaster. We see some guys now picking these pieces up. What else we got here? Here's another one. And I think personally, and by the way, this goes back to what I said earlier. We do use our social media. This is a new product that came in. I'm showing you this product with the hopes that somebody's out there interested in one of these pieces, reach out to one of my guys and ends up purchasing the watch. It's not a secret. We do utilize social media to our benefit in that sense. Anyway, so the 50th anniversary Royal Oak, we got that one now listed at 60 grand. Again, a watch that was actually came out around the time where the market was starting to slow down. But also what AP did is they came out with pretty much all of them at the same time, and it kind of flooded the market, and it didn't really go that crazy. So I've seen these, especially with the green dial, as high as 85 grand, $90,000 out of the gate. People are asking. I remember somebody posted this watch for $400,000. I will say this, and it doesn't have to be this particular one, but for those of you out there that are planning to hold a Royal Oak long term, get yourself the 50th anniversary. Because if you look at some of the auction results and you look at the 40th anniversary, the 25th anniversary, and all the Jubilee sort of the models that they made for Royal Oaks, they all have gone up in value tremendously versus their retail price. Another one that's, come down to earth. Whoops, that's not it. Another one that's come down to earth is obviously the Vacheron Overseas, especially the rose gold. They are now trading way under 100 grand or somewhere around that $80,000 price range. And these things, they move, because what happens with pieces such as this or the Royal Oak that I just showed you earlier is people that were priced out of the market. And by priced out of the market, you say to yourself, well, I just can't see myself paying $200,000 for a Platinum Daytona, for example, right? People felt it was too much. And now they're coming back into the market and they're watching and they're saying, okay, well, I see I've seen the overseas trading around that price range probably for the last 6 months. So the price may have stabilized and consumer confidence slowly starts to come back to the market. The biggest killer to us was the consumer confidence, because the worst thing that can happen to a market is prices get out of hand, mainly due to the fault of, at the very end of the secondary market, well, things were traded B2B and they weren't ended up on people's wrists and prices kept climbing. And that consumer confidence is what feeds us, right? It's you guys being confident to say that, look, I'm going to pay 80 grand for this watch, but I'm kind of afraid it might be 40 next week, right? And slowly but surely that has slowed down and kind of stabilized, which is good news for us. Rafael Costa, Explorer 2, throw that up on the screen, I guess. Explorer 2, Yachtmaster or Datejust for a beginner. 12 grand max budget, or get a Datejust vintage and a Tudor, for example. Again, one of the most difficult questions I ever get asked is, hey, I have a budget, what would you suggest, right? And usually the way we handle this with clients, we'll say, hey, why don't you browse the website, our website, or any other website, and send me some options that sing to you. What do you actually like? And then we find out, what are your actual needs, right? And number one reason today for buying an expensive watch, believe it or not, is actually flex. Number two reason comes a name, history, horology, complications, and functionality. We've gone a long way away from a watch being a tool, and we in an era where the watch is a flex. During COVID, we were in an era where the watch was a dollar sign, and that's slowly starting to go away, and I'm really happy about it. But if it was me, scroll down, I can't see the question. If it was me, kind of like the Explorer 2. I don't know, there's something about it, and again, this is my personal preference, and I actually like the cheaper one. I like the black dial. You could probably go with the previous reference, the 1-1 reference rather than 1-2 reference, and you can still fit a Tudor in there. As far as a Datejust vintage, no. I'll tell you why, because Datejust is probably one of the most produced Rolexes out there. So there's really no vintage Datejust that sort of like that outlier of a collectible watch. If you look at auction results, you don't really see Datejust fetching big numbers. It's your Daytonas, it's certain GMTs and things of that nature. So definitely no on a Datejust vintage. And on Instagram, Barkowski says, what do you think will hold value over the long term, Patek or Journe? I have to go Patek. And it's an, first I'll say it's not a fair comparison, right, in terms of production numbers, right? Because you got to think Journe has only been producing for X amount of years, and very little watches are produced every single year. He has a cult-like following. But the other thing is that, Philippe Dufour had Roger Smith. FP Journe doesn't have a Roger Smith. So what happens to FP Journe when FP Journe decides to retire? People always say, what happens when FP Journe dies? Well, it doesn't have to be that dark. You can just simply retire, right? What happens when he retires? What happens to the company? What happens to the consumer confidence, right? But Patek is the Rolls Royce of all watches. If you look at auction results, who holds all the records, right? Long term. I know that FP Journe just sold for $8 million. It's the most expensive independent that was sold, and well-deserved. But long term, in terms of volume, you also have to look at the market. People always tell me, oh, I got this super watch. It's super limited, but it's crazy independent. We're not going to mention any names. They only made 5 of these. It's super rare. It should be worth gajillions, and yet people want to pay pennies on a dollar. Why? Because there is no market. The less you make, the smaller your market is. And think about the Patek market versus the Journe market. If I took 10 collectors and I asked them, what would you rather have in general, an FP Journe or a Patek? Majority will still pick Patek. So Patek will be the better bet. Will the Japanese single father, let's throw that up on the screen. You can't throw comments up from Instagram on the screen, I guess?
No.
Okay, well, let's go. YouTube. Single father Lanks says, will Japanese and Chinese watches ever take over from the Swiss brand? I see companies like TAG Heuer using Citizen Eco Drive movements in their Solar Aqua Racer already. The answer is no. It's like, when you think cars, you think German engineering kind of thing, right? It can happen, but this is something that usually takes decades. Like the U.S. used to be the king of automotive industry, but then really the Germans are it. I mean, well, they created the first car, the Mercedes, back in 1893, I think was the first car that they made. It didn't really look like a car, it looked more like a bicycle. But if you're talking about, I can see the Japanese and the Chinese watches entering the market. I can see some breakout brands that can play on a sub level as the Swiss boys, for example. Speaking of Germans, Langenzoon, right? They play on the same level as your other brands. You got a guy like a Konstantin Chaikin, who's a Russian watchmaker, right? Who plays sort of in a 7-Eleven. Then you have some newcomers like the boys from Atelier Wen, which I think they made a pretty amazing watch that is slowly to start to enter the market. Some Japanese brands. But the Swiss are the Swiss, right? If you're going to talk about chocolate, you're going to talk about Belgium chocolate, because that's where it was invented, right? If you're going to talk about cars, you're probably going to talk about German engineering. And I'm saying in general, right? But for the most part, don't see them taking over. I can see them taking a small market share. Speaking of taking market share, one of the brands, I did a video where I talked about one of the most improved brands out on the market, and Bulgari was one of them because of the Octa Finissimo line. And they keep coming out with the sketch model. This is one of their latest ones. And notice how flat that just lays down. Probably, by the way, bracelet. I think this is one of the best made bracelets on the newcomer models that's out there in terms of comfort of wear, complexity of it. A lot of people don't pay attention to bracelets. I do. The best example I can come up with the new ellipse that Tech just came out with for like $80,000, and people say, why would you want to pay 80 grand for that stuff? But the money's in a bracelet. It's extremely difficult to design, develop, and produce and manufacture a bracelet that's made well. Like it took Audemars Piguet years upon years and Rolex years upon years to improve on their bracelet and actually make it good. But I absolutely love the sketch, because what you're getting is you're getting the watch, right? And you're getting the functionality sort of sketched out on the screen. So whatever's inside that watch is sort of sketched out on the dial. They did it with an automatic. They did an automatic. They did another sketch. I think it was another chrono. And then they did this. And personally, I think in terms of price range, in terms of design, in terms of look, and more importantly for me, how it sits on a wrist, because I've had a slightly smaller wrist, and this is a fairly large watch, especially it's a square watch. The way this bracelet is made and the way this thing sits on a wrist is just extremely comfortable. And of course, I'm a little bit biased. This is Gerald Genta DNA and blah, 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 blah. You guys know how I feel about Genta. So kind of really like this watch. I was excited when this came in. Let's see. We have next on the list, we have, oh, look at that. It is the Pepsi GMT, right? And again, the watch that was trading in the high 20s up to mid 30s is now back down around that $20,000 price range. Your day dates, people, the amount of DMs you guys send me about, oh, my AD can give me this, can I make money? Well, this is a watch that is no more. A lot of the gold models from Rolex, you can no longer make money on if you buy that list at UAD, because a lot of them are trading either around that list price or slightly under, depending on how important the watch is. And again, one of those watches that people are kind of taking advantage of, like, okay, I didn't want to pay 70 grand for this. I now can buy it. I was selling it for 38.5. So now I'm priced into the market instead of out of the market. What else do we got? Black or green bezel for my first Submariner. Definitely black. Submariner is one of the most recognizable watches out there. Look, everybody knows that Rolex has the nickname of first money watch. And if you're going to buy a first money watch and you're going to go for that flex factor or that show up factor, I did it, except I did it with a 1.6, I forget, there was a 5-digit reference Datejust from like the early 90s that I paid $1,000 for 20 some years ago. And for me, it was a flex factor. So definitely I would say go with the black bezel Submariner, just a regular one. Instagram, Danielle Costa 5000. Have you seen any Panerai radium here with JLC movement? What do you know about it? There were some Panerais that were made with JLC movement. I would really have to scratch my head and go back to the Panaristi days. And this is going back about 15, 16 years. So I can't really answer that off the cuff. I do know that some existed, but there's also always a lot of controversy around some of these older Panerais. And so I tend not to touch that, to be fair. What do you think of the quality of Cartier watches and movements recently? I've always been a fan, and they're getting more popular. I mean, look, let's talk about Cartier in general, right? The first wristwatch, the first men's wristwatch, the first ever wristwatch was created by Breguet. It was the Queen of Naples, made for the Queen of Naples. And around that time, wristwatches were strictly a piece of jewelry for a lady, right? Men were under no circumstance. Wearing a wristwatch for men back then was like wearing earrings, basically. It was very taboo until, Mr. Dumas wanted a wristwatch. He was flying. And guess what? Cartier was happy to oblige, and he made him the Santos. So as far as I'm concerned, that is the top 10 most iconic watches in the world. And I also mentioned Cartier in the most. I did a video. What do you call it? Most improved brand in the next 15 years or something, Matt. It's on my YouTube channel, or Luxury Bazaar. It's on Luxury Bazaar's YouTube channel, where I talked about the 5 most improved brand in the last 15 years, because I've been around that long. And Cartier was certainly one of them. Cartier did a complete 180-degree turnaround. They went from making jewelry pieces to actual timepieces to actual watches. The quality of the movements have improved. They got away from that quartz bandwagon because, they would take a Tank or a Santos, throw a quartz movement in there, and it would be sold as a piece of jewelry rather than a horological timepiece. They have since turned it around and done a tremendous job. So I'm a big fan of the stuff that they're doing now, and I think the future for them, listen, they're the number 2 selling brand, right? 2023 was Rolex, Cartier, then Omega. Granted, Rolex did more business than 2, 3, and 4 combined, but nevertheless, they were number 2. And I've been jumping back and forth between Omega and Cartier. Did I sell the Monara collection? No, not yet. Not everybody's lining up to spend $300,000 on a product. You guys have to understand something. The higher something is priced, the more difficult it is to sell. Plus, it's a very specific product. I mean, it's borderline soft porn, those pieces. They're amazing, but it's going to take somebody with a really, different taste to, pick something like that up. We've sold a ton of we had a bunch of them that were like just one-offs, not part of the set because they were sold separately as well. We sold a bunch of those. Hi, Roman from Southwest UK from RoboDog. How did you get into watch game, and also what is your view on the Rolex Zombie? Was I not privy to something? What is the Rolex Zombie? Well, I tell them how I got into this industry by accident. I was in banking. I was into watches. I bought watches from a local great dealer. Internet was just starting. He came up to me and said, Roman, this computer stuff. I said, it's a little bit more complex than that. How about throwing I'll give you some watches. You'll throw them up on eBay and make a profit. I said it was a bad idea. Who the hell's going to buy $10,000 watches on eBay? Lo and behold, my wife said, hey, I think it's a good idea. Let's give it a shot. And the first watch was sold on eBay was an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak City sales in stainless steel for $9,650 to a gentleman in Germany. So that's kind of fell on my lap. I was doing it part-time for 3 years and then kind of went to this full-time. Here we are. What else do you guys put in here? We have, the 26401 offshore. These things, people ask me for value in the space of a gold AP that's big, right? And I always point to this watch because these things are trading in the mid 30s at the moment. They were trading around $40,000 price. They've always been kind of stable because not everybody has the wrist for this 45 millimeter monster. But if you think about what you're getting a Royal Oak. This is an offshore version, but you are getting a Royal Oak. You're getting it in rose gold. Rose gold and black is my favorite combo. You get a lot of good things from here. Things like the ceramic bezel, for example, the rubber strap, ceramic pushers. There's a lot of value here in terms of, but you just have to have the wrist. This watch is heavy and this watch is big. And this has probably been the go-to for those that want to stay under 50 grand or even 40 grand in this case to buy a watch that's instantly recognizable and is quite flashy because of its size. And speaking of Santos, so actually, before I went live, I was reviewing an email from Matthew, who said, "Hey, here's some of the next videos that we're going to do," and some of those watches, some of those topics were basic questions you guys always ask. What's the perfect watch in this price range, or 3-watch collection in that price range, and so on and so forth. Well, this particular Santos, there was one of the videos that we're going to do is we're going to do price ranges like 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20. This is one of the watches I picked in a 10 to 20 price range because, again, of everything I just said about the Santos earlier and the fact that this is a gold watch that's flashy but yet subtle. It's sporty yet can be worn with a suit, so pretty flexible. Zombie is the two-tone GRNR. Okay, can we pull that up on the screen? Oh, I see it up there. Second image. There we go. Oh, okay. So I think that Rolex is doing the same thing that they've been doing for the longest time. I didn't know this nickname yet. Thank you. I appreciate it. I swear to God, you can't keep up with Rolex nicknames, right? So listen, it only made sense that when they made this watch in titanium, that they went on and did it in two-tone. This is what Rolex always does, small incremental changes. Do I think it's particularly attractive? No. Do I think it's going to sell like hotcakes? Absolutely. And I just, no, don't like it. I think that should have stayed silver. Like there was no need to make this in a two-tone. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't like it. Oh my God, he's so handsome. Thank you, Krista. Daniel Fernandez, how do you think big brands cutting parts accounts will affect watch servicing? Also, it seems like watch service prices have gone up 30% for independent watchmakers. Has this been your experience? So I have my own service center, right? And I also utilize 2 outside service centers because everything that comes into this office tends to be pre-owned, and we warranty stuff for 3 years. So it goes through the full thing. It goes through functionality check, obviously first authenticity check in terms of not just is the watch fake or not, but the parts that are inside. The watch gets taken apart and looked at inside and out, tested on various machines. There are cosmetic changes that need to be done. We do it. And what brands mostly like Rolex are trying to do, especially with the new Rolex CPO program, obviously they want to bring as much of that service in-house because it's a big money maker. If you look at a standard service, forget which watch it is, because in reality, a standard service, if the watch is properly functioning, is just running a little slow or fast, and odds are it needs an oil change, literally. You take the watch apart, you wash out all the parts. You've seen these videos on YouTube numerous times. Throw in an ultrasonic machine, put it all back together, throw in a couple of machines, test for accuracy, timing, water test, you're done, right? That's not a very expensive thing to do. But if you go to the manufacturer to do that, it usually ends up costing you 3x, right? Yeah, so why wouldn't, if I was a manufacturer, why wouldn't I want to do that? But there's always going to be watchmakers out there that will get around it. The only time you can't get around servicing a watch is when you need a particular part that you can only get from the manufacturer. When the watch is really messed up, like let's say the crystal breaks and the wheels get messed up because the glass made it inside the movement. Let's say the watch was dropped from the 5th floor and it's literally shattered into pieces. Yes, of course, you're gonna have to go to a manufacturer and bite the bullet. But yeah, it's I've seen prices of everything go up over the last thing. It wasn't just the price of watches that went up over COVID. Also, the price of servicing went up. And here's what happens when things go up. Like people talk about inflation in general, right? You know, they say, oh, well, the loaf of bread used to be $1, now it's $3. Well, the inflation stopped. It doesn't go back down to $1. It'll probably settle somewhere in between, right? Whether it's closer to $1 or $3, who knows, right? I'm not going to try to pretend that I'm an expert in economics. But you have noticed that while a lot of the crazy priced hot models, your Rolexes, your Nautiluses, your Aquanauts, your Royal Oaks and stuff like that, yeah, they've come down in price. They certainly didn't come down to the same levels that were pre-COVID height. In fact, they're much higher than the price of pre-COVID. In fact, pre-COVID, there were 2 Rolexes selling over retail. And that was the Daytona, which has always sold over retail. And then the newcomer, Sky Dweller in stainless steel. I remember doing a video where I said, I think we're finally going to have another watch in the Rolex lineup that's going to be trading over list, like the Daytona, and that's the Sky Dweller. And then the COVID boom hit, and everything started trading over list. But a lot of these models are still over list, right? Let's see. What's this? Okay, so this particular Daytona, right? 49.5. That's list or around list, right? Oh, we have the zombie. So here it is. Let's see what my guys set the price at. I don't know what the retail on this watch is, but I know that we set the price at 19.5. And now that I look at this in person, funny, he asked me about the zombie, and here it is. And why is this the zombie though? Like why? You guys think this looks like a zombie? Like why?
Really? I would think it would be green.
Yeah, I don't know why you guys dubbed this a zombie. So obviously this thing looks brand spanking new, and we're selling it for 19.5. I'm not sure what the retail on it is. And again, I'm not a fan of adding the gold accents. I'm not a fan of making this watch two-tone. My favorite two-tone watch from Rolex is the root beer. I think that actually aesthetically looks great. I am a fan of the two-tone Jubilee bracelet with yellow accents, but I feel like this watch should have stayed with that ghostly look, that understated look, and this takes away the understated. Let's see. If I choose one Breguet watch, Pato Familiar says, if I choose one Breguet watch, which one would it be? I would most likely go with, well, I will definitely go with a Tourbillon. It's a question of which Tourbillon I would go with because, look, if you're going to buy a Breguet, godfather of all watchmaking, guy that invented the Tourbillon, I always said I'm going to have a Tourbillon. A lot of deals to be had out there on Breguet, especially some of their older classic Tourbillons. You can find a very nice Breguet Tourbillon under 50,000 and under. If I had to pick a particular tourbillon, and if it's just one, I'd probably go with their marine tourbillon because you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get a sportier watch. I'm a fan of more sporty watches than I am dressy watches, although I like both. So it'd probably have to be the marine tourbillon, not a typical Breguet tourbillon. Most would say probably classique is better because it has that classy look, the way it looked a long time ago. But yeah, it would definitely be a tourbillon, and for me, it would probably be the marine tourbillon. They just made a new one in platinum blue dial. Seconds 84, tossed up between a Panda Daytona and a Ghost on Oyster Flex. Why would someone pay over 30K for a steel watch one for slightly more? You can get a gold one. I hear you, and I agree with you. But the Rolex Daytona in stainless steel has been the #1 most popular watch in the world for a long, long time. I remember when I started out in the business, we were selling Daytonas. I mean, back then, granted, they were designer Daytonas. I remember selling those for $9,500, and I think the retail was $6,500 or something, or $5,800, right? They've always sold over list, and there's a reason for that because everybody wants it. Oh, look what we got in the room. We got Nina Ritchie. You guys remember Nina? Nina used to work with us, and now Nina has gone out on her own. Shameless plugs for Nina. She opened up her own social media agency, and we're very happy for her. We still talk every week. She texts me every other day, to be fair. And Nina says, what's the most surprising watch you saw out in the wild? I'm not sure how to even answer that. The most surprising watch I saw out in the wild? I mean, I've seen so many things. I would have to say it's, remember we were in, actually you were with me in Geneva, and we saw what the guy that made the watch that had like a 48-day power reserve. And like they said, if you unwound the spring, it can go from Geneva to Zurich or something like that, right? That was a pretty cool watch to see. Also, it's really often not the watch, but also the person, right? It's cool to see a Vianney Holter watch when Vianney Holter hands it to you, right? It's cool to see a David Candell watch when you're wearing a what do you call it? An MB&F HM6, which is the one that he actually worked with Max with to create it, and now he hands you his own watch, right? It's cool to it's cool when it's paired up with the person responsible for the particular watch. She says, I can't stay away. What do we got? Stop. You're scrolling too fast. I can't see. Thoughts about Glashute Original. I always say it's a shame, right? Because Glashute is part of a group. And, you know, when you get brands like Blancpain, Glashute, Breguet, they get piled under a group. And, you know, they have a bit of a different business model where they're not trying to be the most popular. They're sort of like slow and steady, showing numbers, being profitable. It tends to kill the brand off a little bit or make it out of mind, out of sight. When was the last time somebody flexed on you with a Glashute? In fact, I think we have like one Glashute in stock, right? They did well in the era of early 2000s, leading up to the 08 crisis, because that was the era of dress watches, right? When the sports watches started becoming hot, the likes of Audemars Piguet Offshores and stuff like that, they tried to switch gears and they tried to make some sports model. They weren't really good at it. In fact, some of the designs and things of that nature. It's like I always say, rule of thumb, especially now, is the easiest way to do it. And, you know, you go to some of the top watch accounts that are out there, right? They're not in the business; they're just posting watches. How often do you see them post a Glashute? And that's a problem. Frank Miller was a victim of that early on when he actually sent letters to guys like us to cease and desist, not to put pictures of his watches up online and sell them, because that's what we used to do. We used to put up a bunch of pictures and sell them because we could call 10 dealers and order one at 10 over cost. And, you know, and then Frank Miller became out of mind, out of sight. But Glashute became out of mind, out of sight because, you know, when the business models have switched, right, from selling air or pictures to actual having physical inventory, going more the pre-owned route, if something isn't selling, odds are I'm not buying it. Like I showed you, here's the new arrivals, right? We have Rolex, Tudor, Patek, AP, Vacheron, Bulgari, Rolex, AP, Cartier, Rolex. Now I have two more Bulgaris in here and a Breitling, right? It's not a Glashute in here. There's not a Blancpain in here, right? So, oh, this is a good one. Cellini Prince or a Reverso. This is on Instagram. Scroll up. This is from Brian Tiger. Sorry, guys, that's tough for me to see because those are smaller. So Brian Tiger says, Prince or Reverso? Absolutely Reverso. Reverso is in my top 10 most iconic watches in the world, right, ever made. 1931, they made the watch for the polo players to be able to protect the watch. You could flip it over to a side that had no glass on it, and it would be protected. It's funny, I had one of those original Reversos from the 30s. It's this tiny, small, kind of very flimsy little thing. The mechanism of the Reverso itself originally had 18 parts. Don't quote me. I think it was 18 parts, and then later they revamped it, and it was 26 parts and all, made it a lot sturdier. But I can see how that idea was great. The Art Deco design, that Art Deco is not something that's ever going to go away, right? It's one of the most iconic design periods in the world. And of course, the Reverso fits under that umbrella. So I will take that Reverso over that Rolex Prince all day, every day.
I saw quite a few people asking about Citizen watches. So what's your opinion on those?
So I don't know. I can't give you an opinion. Oftentimes people ask me about watches that are slightly less expensive, right? Casios and Citizens and things of that nature. I don't have enough knowledge. And here's what I tell you. Here's how I gauge my knowledge. For me, if I've handled the watches, if I bought them, sold them, traded them over an X amount of time, I consider myself experienced. I also consider myself experienced once I understand the guts of the watch, how they're made, et cetera, et cetera. And Citizens watches is just not one of those things that I haven't really dealt with. Sometimes I look at that stuff and I say to myself, well, who's doing better, Citizen or some fancy brand? It's usually probably guys like Citizens that do better because of the price point. More people out there can afford a watch that's $500 and under versus 50,000 and up, right? So that market shrinks really quick as the price goes up. But I couldn't really give you an opinion on it. What is the most? So Pato Familia says, what is the most insane dial you have ever seen? Oof. That's a tough one to answer. I'll tell you, because now you can talk about rarity of dials, right? Like a Conjar stamp Nautilus, for example, because there's only 6 of them in the world, let's say. Or you can talk about a dial that just looks sick, right? I think when it comes to aesthetics, I'm going to go with some of the older dates that, like the Malachite dial, for example, the Rubellite dials on Daytonas, right? Any of the stone dials that Rolex has made in the past are absolutely insane. Meteorite dials are some of the prettiest and aesthetically dials out there, and they're timeless, right? You can have meteorite watches just continue going for the next God knows how many years, so long as they have a piece of that meteorite, right? But I would probably say the most insane dials are going to be some of those stone dials that I've seen from Rolex. Favorite Salmon dial? Jason Chan Jr. says, what is my favorite Salmon dial? I would probably go with the 5270 in platinum Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chrono with the Salmon dial. It just works, right? And while AP is my favorite brand, and you would think I would say, maybe the 15202 BC with a Salmon dial or something of that nature. No, it's got to be the Patek. I just think that the functionalities or the function displays on the watch work really well against the Salmon background. Ryback on Instagram, is Tudor just as good as Rolex quality-wise? I tend to think so. Oddly enough, that video I keep referring to, that was also one of the brands that I picked, the most improved brands of the last 15 years. And Tudor used to be like, Tudor, ew, right? It's just some cheap alternative to Rolex. That Tudor has been a brand that stood on its own for quite some time at this point. And notice their prices have been climbing up as well because the demand has been there. And I feel like it's only a matter of time where they will have that complete separation of saying, well, Tudor's just that cheaper Rolex kind of thing. It's gotten to a point where you have guys out there that won't touch a Rolex, and they're strictly Tudor fans because they like them for what they are, and they will choose a Tudor over a Rolex at any given time. And I also judge based on like sales numbers. What do you think will the AP cause worth on a gray market? I know one has sold for $375,000 out the door. Do I think it'll come down from that? Yes. Usually when things come out and people want them and they want them yesterday, there, believe it or not, clients out there that they don't care. they want to, and they want it yesterday, and money is no object. They will stabilize over list. I think I absolutely love the watch, and I talked about it on Instagram and YouTube. I think they did a tremendous job. Moreover, developing, it's a thought that AP puts into every product when they develop a product, from design to horology, right? The fact that they came out with a new movement that allowed them to hide, to allow them basically get rid of the hands in the center of the dial, where in previous models like the Marvel pieces that they made, the hands kind of blocked the figurine. Well, here, nothing is blocked, right? I think the little attention to detail that they paid on the watch, just everything about it, it just screams AP. Size, also a lot more wearable than its original concept counterpart. So the watch will stabilize. It will stabilize over list. I don't think it'll be out there for $375, but expect this watch to be in the low 300s. It's probably where it's going to end up staying. Alfred CO3, AP5402, a Patek Philippe 3700, and do you like the tropical dials on them? So there are levels to, let's address tropical dials, right? For those of you guys don't know, usually when a watch sits in the dark for a prolonged amount of time, the dial tends to turn tropical. But here we have arguably two of Genta's greatest designs, right? Although some will argue that maybe it's the King Midas that was a great design. Maybe it was the Cobra that was a great design, right? I'm biased. I'm going to go with a 5402. Number one, because I'm biased and AP happens to be my favorite brand. And I think the Royal Oak is the greatest blank canvas ever created. And history proves itself. Here we are 50 some years later, and Royal Oaks come out and they're still popular no matter what the variation is. And if you're looking at the 3700, it's like, and okay, so number one reason is because I'm biased. Number two is because it's the first sports luxury watch after which every other brand follows suit. A lot of them use Gerald Genta, like the Nautilus in '76. Of course, outside of Genta, you had the Laureato from Girard-Perregaux back in 1975. That was not Gerald Genta. And, it set a big trend 50 years ago that's here today. You got to consider the timing where a guy says, I want to make a stainless steel watch for a ton of money. And people looked at him like, what are you, an idiot? Stainless steel watches are just that. They're just tool watches that people are using as tools. We didn't have iPhones back then. And here you are charging all this money, and guess what? It's stuck, and it's stuck well. Of course, on the other hand, you're going to say, well, Patek Philippe, the Rolls Royce of all watches, the greatest brand out there. It's it. When it comes to watches, Patek Philippe is it. And you're like, okay, well, and that gave birth to the Nautilus, another one, which is, you can easily say, the greatest blank canvas. They came from the same person. It's often a tough choice. So I'm going to break it down to the fact that I prefer AP over Patek Philippe for no other reasons that I just like AP better. And not that they're better or worse, but if I was doing it, I would do the 5402. But in reality, I would have both. I would have three. I would have the Holy Trinity. I would have the 5402. I would have the 3700 Nautilus, and I would have the original 222 Astronaut Constantine. I just purchased a Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT Coke on steel bracelet. Interested to know your opinion on this watch. It's one of our best sellers. Like literally, we can't get enough of them. It's one of those watches where we like to say they play like hotcakes, bread and butter pieces, right? And again, I'll generalize Tudor. What I like about Tudor is it basically takes Rolex back to where Rolex used to be. For example, riveted bracelets that are modernized, not as flimsy as the old ones, right? Some of the bezels, the outlays, it's like getting a brand new vintage watch kind of thing. And that's what I always liked about Tudor. So yeah, nothing but good things to say about it. Why EXP on YouTube says, why has AP taken the biggest hit to secondary prices while Rolex and Patek are not down in price? That is actually not so true, because there are Rolexes out there that have taken a hit percentage-wise much higher than some of the APs. But in general, like for example, a Platinum Daytona got up to $200,000 today. It's trading, you can find a nice one for around $85,000, $95,000, right? While there were Royal Oaks that also took a hit to the tune of 50%. But if you look at price closer to retail versus price change in general, I still say AP is a winner, because if you look at the gap between the MSRP versus what they're selling now, and most of them are selling over MSRP still, a lot of the Royal Oaks stayed over MSRP, wherever Rolexes, a lot of the gold Rolexes are trading at MSRP and under, or close to it, right? So I don't know how true it is, but at the same token, it's also not a fair statement because Rolex makes 1 million watches a year, while Audemars Piguet makes 60,000 watches a year. So it's a loaded question a bit, but I would suggest taking a look at, just pick 10 APs, 10 hot APs today, and look at their MSRP versus what they're selling for, versus Rolex. And I think where AP was is in the gold pieces department. And again, they win because they make less. We got a super chat from Isaac D. I love the setup names, right? So I'm going to read this I suck the snoots, right? But in reality, the guy's handle is I suck these nuts, which is interesting. But anyway, what is it? What's the other one? Bend over, and there's a bunch of them. But shout out for doing that. Being a sneaker guy and a gun lover, what sneakers and gun would you match with the RM you are wearing? Wow. So I'm a big Air Max guy. Oh yeah, I'm a big Air Max guy. So I would probably just put on. In fact, I'm wearing. It's just we have the overhead. Here's the sneakers that I'm wearing. Unfortunately, I left my gun in my office, but the gun I would match it up would be the Zeftech OZ9. You guys can look that up. Let's see. What watchmaker or brand is the most underrated currently, in your opinion, right now in the market, and why? And again, another loaded question from JJJ. And the reason I say it's a loaded question is because I can go to the independents. I can go to brands like MB&F. I can go to brands like Urwerk. I can go to brands like Google Force, right? But they're the victim of the fact that, again, they have a much smaller production, a much smaller market, right? And if I have to think about underrated, I'm going to go to the big boys. I'm going to go to guys like JJ Lecoultre. I'm going to go to guys like IWC. I'm going to go to guys like Ulysse Nardin, because doing a comparison across independents, I could have said that about independents at any given market condition, right? But if you look at what you get for the money from the three brands that I just mentioned, because they do all their stuff in-house basically, and they're able to bring that value for it, like you're able to buy a perpetual candle IWC for under $20,000. And that's a Kirk Klaus IWC, which is a whole thing. You guys are welcome to Google it. I'm not going to go into that story. But you have a Ulysse Nardin, marine tourbillons out there for 25, 30 grand, right? You have JJ Lecoultre perpetuals, chronographs, and all kinds of complications for no money relatively to the most popular brand. So that's why I always try to go to those three, because I feel like you have the history. I mean, JJ Lecoultre, watchmaker of all watchmakers, you know what I mean? Or the watchmaker to the watchmakers, right? IWC made some of those iconic advances in the world of perpetual calendars. Ulysse Nardin, best chronometers going back to 1846, right? A lot of history, a lot of value. And what the brands do is, like, if I'm a brand that's not in the top 2 or 3, or not the most popular talked about, I'm going to pack my watches with value to let the consumer see that, hey, look at what you're getting with me. Look what kind of value you get for the money. You're spending $50,000 with me. I'm giving you a full-blown perpetual calendar, right? Or let's say for $20,000 for IWC, you're getting a full-blown perpetual calendar. Ulysse Nardin, you're going to get an enamel Danzig Cardinal dial. You're going to get their silicium technology and their escapements and their tourbillons, right? JJ Lecoultre. Hey, I made watches for most of these brands that you guys, are boasting about, like the Royal Oak, for example, ran on my movement for the longest time, right? So those are the three I'd probably be looking at. And again, those have, for the most part, I can bring those up today, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or 5 years from now, depending on what they do going forward. Daniel Fernandez, super chat. Have you heard of the guy that constantly talks about you and has sidekick names Kino? No, I have not. I don't pay attention to, again, when you get yourself out on social media and you expose yourself, and we expose ourselves pretty well. I'm going to read that in a second. Don't scroll. And when you expose yourself this way, you expose yourself to both the positive and the negative. My friend Nico, he told me when we're starting the whole YouTube thing, he said, Roman, do yourself a favor as your channel starts to grow and you start climbing in subscribers and viewership, don't read the comments. And I, for the most part, take his advice. Sometimes I don't. But it's honestly, I'm going to get off this live. I'm not going to look this up because there have been numerous YouTubers out there. Because remember, when you do this, like when you do the lives, I decided to do these once a week. I'm kind of combining unboxing, showing you some watches, answering some questions, giving you some updates, and plus I like doing this. But there are YouTube channels out there that are dedicated to doing nothing but lives. Why? Because you make money on the lives. You guys are giving me super chats, right? So this gentleman, EXP, $4.99. Well, actually, no, that's pounds. So that's like $7. Now, as I told you in the beginning of this, all the super chats or whatever you guys choose to give, that actually goes as a bonus at the end of the year to my social media, and marketing team. We're literally, and as well as the money we make from the views from regular videos, all that gets compiled, and towards the end of the year, we split it up among them because they're not in sales and they can't make commission. So this is their commission. But these guys, what they do is we call them e-beggars. They go on YouTube and they go live, and it's all about the super chats because people want to get their word in, and to get their word in, the easiest thing to do is to do a super chat because then we're obliged to actually read it, right? I sometimes miss them, but the bottom line is that anybody that goes on a live can be there for a certain amount of time, and in that time they can make $500, maybe, right? In a couple hours, 3 hours, maybe $1,000, depending on how many people log on. And to do that, you have to have interesting topic. And what do we know? It does best on the internet, drama. So sometimes I just make shit up, to be honest with you. There's been so much interesting stuff made up about me that, like, I've watched a couple and I just laughed. Like, it was actually entertaining to me, and they were talking shit about me. What was the other super chat that I didn't get to? Speaking of which, so why have AP taken a bigger hit on the secondary market? I know we talked about this. This is against Patek and Rolex. Again, I don't think it's true. I said it earlier. You really have to get out there and you have to compare how much closer we got to MSRP, right? It's not necessarily about, this was this and then now it's this. It's, you look at Rolex, a lot of the Rolex have come back down to retail and under retail, where with AP, especially the high APs, that's not the case. Same goes with Pateks. And what did you say about the 5402? Also, price range of the 5402 ST C serials at these days. So it really depends. I'm actually talking to a gentleman right now who is looking at a 5402, and I gave him two options around $75,000. One is an A serial, an earlier one, or the earliest one, I should say, and the other one was a C serial, and the C serial is the same price because it's complete. Very difficult to find those things with box and papers. And but if that C was incomplete, it'd probably be off around the $50,000 price range. So there's probably about a 20 to 25% difference between A and C. Let's see. Dakomar Sarkar says, preach. JLC, IWC, Elise Nardin, Zenith, Perpetual Counters, Bangor, Chrono, Tourbillons, etc. And as I said earlier, yes. So I've always found those things to be undervalued. But again, I said it earlier, the number one reason people purchase watches today is flex. And I've always said there's nothing wrong with that. I bought my first watch because I wanted to flex. Hence, I bought a Rolex, first money watch. So if you are sort of buying your first watch, of course you want a watch that's recognized. When I bought my first Rolex, my Rolex walked into the room 2 minutes before I did. Hey, everybody, I got a Rolex, right? I was just at an event in Florida during Art Basel, and people that knew me as a watch guy in the room, I could see the body language where they were trying for me to see their watch, right? And it's not just goes for watch guys, it goes for anybody, trying to attract the opposite sex, often. It's a guy I follow on Instagram, NYC Watch Guy, if you guys know him or not. A great guy, got an excellent sense of humor, amazing collection. He posted a Patek Philippe, and he said, my PP makes my PP happy. And I put asterisks and said bigger, right? And you guys get where I'm going with this. Flex is a big part of it, and there's nothing wrong with it. I have a couple of more watches that I want to show. I talked about this one earlier, and this was sort of a gamble, and people always say, Roman, you buy some of the craziest shit. This is one of those Roman's buys, and this is a watch that, believe it or not, sometimes when we pick up pieces, we don't know was the value worth it or not until that watch actually sells or doesn't sell. And we do take a lot of risk, which is why when people always say, well, why are you making so much on this and making so much on that? Well, what you guys don't see is stuff that we don't make much on. Sometimes the chances that we take with the hopes of making a profit. And this is one of those watches. This is the carbon minute repeater, Bulgari Octa Finissimo, lightest and thinnest minute repeater in the world. A minute repeater made in carbon, which they took a big chance with that one because you know, the minute repeater is all about sounding good. And those guys that buy minute repeaters, they're all about how well does this thing sound, right? And so for me, this was one of those chance watches. So we shall see. And this thing just literally weighs nothing. It reminds me of the RM 6702s. I talked about, you know, bread and butter stuff. Breitling has become that. You know what's funny about Breitling is 20 some years we've been doing this. Breitling has never been like a big seller for me. And that wasn't because I chose not to sell. It's just situationally, I never really had a whole lot of Breitlings in stock. In the beginning, people requested these Breitlings when we were selling, again, quote unquote, pictures online. We sold some, but then I never really got into it. But Breitling has been picking up steam because I feel like people are starting to look at them as a pretty prestigious brand. In the beginning, when I started, it was just like, well, you get a Rolex, you know, worst case scenario, you know, if you can't do the Rolex, you get on the Megan. And you say worst case scenario, you get a Breitling. And there was a period of time where Breitlings, especially the big Avengers, when bigger was better. People would ice them out, and that was like a big trend, and that sort of hurt the brand and their other models and things of that nature. What is it selling for? Let's see. I don't even see it on the list.
That should be the last page.
No, I don't see it. Not on the list. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, it's under $4,000. But you know, I think Breitling's are the quintessential pilot watches, and I think they're cool. And then another Bulgari. You guys notice a lot of Bulgaris, right? And you think, why are you buying up all these Bulgaris? Well, it's because they sell. We found a cool one. Actually, not myself. Ed found a cool one, right? And this is the Maserati edition. I don't remember what this was limited to. I know it was a limited edition made for Maserati. The last Maserati watch that I can think of that sold just okay was the Maserati that Audemars Piguet did. They did it for the 90th anniversary of the brand. They made it in a millenary case around the time where offshores were all the rage, and they were selling at 20, 30, sometimes double its retail value out there. And they actually did well for a little while because they sort of piggybacked off the success of their trios. Like they made a limited Montoya with titanium, rose, and platinum. They did the same thing for the millionaire. Then they made the Maserati Tourbillon, and then they made the same watch in carbon. It took off. Then the 08 crisis hit, and shit went downhill. But I think this one, how much is this one? Yeah, it's 8,000. That one, I don't know what it is. Guys, I'm gonna take a few last questions, and I'm gonna get out of here. How long has it been? An hour and 10. I'm supposed to be doing this for an hour, but of course I'm gonna run over. Daniel Fernandez says, "What did you talk to Trump about? Is the watch biz already up since he won?" The watch business doesn't react as fast as you think. When it comes to Trump, I talked to him. The conversation we had didn't have any particular agenda. He invited me to have lunch with him, and I sat with him for 2 hours having lunch with him and his golf buddies. He just finished doing 18 rounds of golf. So it was a very casual conversation. We talked a little bit about everything: politics, family, sneakers. My son was with me. We talked about golf. We talked about numerous things. We obviously talked a little bit about politics and the upcoming election. But for the most part, I felt like it was me who just finished playing around of golf with my buddies, and we just sat there and shot the shit kind of thing. And as far as the watch business up since he won, the effect of the watch business, both the down and the up, they're not as quick. It's a wheel, right? There's a lot of other things that are playing into the overall state of the market. The problems in Asia, China, for one, is what's having the biggest effect. Well, people thought it was geopolitical, it was the wars. No, the biggest issue that we faced in the market was China having their issues with commercial real estate, right? And that slowly comes in and just as slowly goes out. There is one thing that happens fast in the market is the hype. Should the hype pick up because of what we saw during COVID? If you see like a slightest pickup on certain things and people start to jump in right away thinking, okay, it's going back up, and they remember how quickly it went back up, you may see that bit of a crazy start during COVID. I doubt that will happen. I think, again, we're back to normalcy where right now the market is going to be doing this. And it's gonna go up slowly, because if I look back to what I started in terms of pricing to where we are today, obviously it's up tremendously overall, but you're gonna have your ups and downs. And for now, we're sort of sitting in that steady plus minus 10, 20% range. Please hit the minute repeater on the Octa Finissimo. Well, where's the sound coming from? Is it that mic? Oh, hold on. I'm gonna have to. Hold on, guys. I have to unwrap this whole thing. This is going to be like the grand finale, right? We're going to set up the Octafinissimo minute repeater. Let me wind the watch first. And let me set the time to like 11:50 something.
You said you're the man for doing this.
I am the man for doing this. I like listening to minute repeaters. All right, everybody be quiet, I guess. Here? Okay, I didn't hear it, but I'm sure you guys heard it through the mic. I heard it slightly. Well, that's going to be it, guys. I'm going to be doing this once a week. And as you noticed, outside of like the watches they put on here and prepare for me, I'm kind of winging it. Actually, to include the watches, I didn't really know what was in this box until I sat down. I think I missed a couple of watches. Oh, speaking of the deals I talked about, I missed the Jaeger. Talk about a value. I missed an IWC Lewis Hamilton watch. I missed a gold AP. But anyway, I'm gonna be, like I said, I usually tend to wing these things, and I let you guys into the room, and then you guys ask questions, and it kind of brings up specific topics. So here we are. But if you do have suggestions in regards to what you want to see on these lives, or if you want to see some more of a, I don't know, a method to this madness, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram. Yes, I do answer my DMs. You guys know that. They DM me. And yeah, that would be it. I appreciate everybody that tuned in. Thank you, everyone. My media team thanks you for all your super chats. Thank you for your support. I'll see you next week.